Kane groaned as he pried himself from the pilot's seat, the metal frame of his ship groaning in protest. Smoke filled the cockpit, and the emergency lights flickered weakly. The impact had nearly torn his vessel apart, and judging by the alarms screaming in his ears, it was a miracle he was still alive. His fingers ran over the controls, attempting to get a reading. The screen sputtered to life for a brief second before cutting out entirely. Useless. Kane sighed and unbuckled himself, kicking open the jammed door and stepping out onto the damp ground. The jungle around him was thick, humid, and alive with alien sounds. Towering trees with glowing blue veins twisted high into the sky, their roots weaving across the ground like a tangled mess of serpents. Strange creatures flitted between branches, some with too many wings, others with too many eyes. This was bad. Kane knew nothing about this planet, and worse, his ship wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. He turned, examining the damage. The left thruster was completely wrecked, and half of the hull had crumpled from the crash. Repairs would take days, maybe weeks, if he even had the tools. Then, he felt it. A presence. Someone was watching him. Kane didn't move, didn't react, but his hand inched toward the blaster strapped to his thigh. He scanned the dense foliage, searching for movement. There. A silhouette, barely visible behind the thick leaves. "Come out," Kane called, his voice steady despite the tension coiling in his muscles. "I know you're there." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the leaves shifted, and she stepped into view. She was unlike any alien Kane had encountered. Her skin had a deep iridescent hue, shifting between blues and purples depending on how the light hit her. Her eyes, large and luminescent, held an intelligence that sent a chill down his spine. Long silver-white hair cascaded down her back, and she wore simple, practical garments made from materials Kane didn't recognize. "You are not from here," she said. Her voice was smooth, almost hypnotic. Kane smirked, keeping his stance relaxed but ready. "Yeah, you could say that. My ship had a little disagreement with your atmosphere." She studied him for a long moment before nodding. "It is damaged beyond your ability to repair." Kane didn't like the certainty in her tone. "And you know that how?" "I know how machines work," she said simply. "I can fix it." Hope flickered in Kane's chest, but he didn't let it show. He had been around enough planets, enough people, to know that nothing came for free. "What's the catch?" The alien woman tilted her head slightly, as if weighing her words. "You must take me with you." Kane narrowed his eyes. "Why?" "No questions," she said, her expression unreadable. "That is my price." Everything about this screamed trouble. Kane didn't trust her, didn't trust this planet, and definitely didn't trust whatever game she was playing. But without her help, he was stranded. Finally, he sighed. "Fine. You fix my ship, you've got a ride." The ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "Then we have an agreement." Kane watched as the alien woman moved toward his wrecked ship with a sense of purpose, her glowing eyes scanning the damage as if already calculating a solution. He crossed his arms, skeptical but intrigued. If she really knew what she was doing, he wouldn't question it. At least, not yet. She knelt beside the twisted metal, pressing her hands against the fractured surface. Thin, filament-like strands extended from her fingertips, weaving through the wreckage, feeling, sensing. Kane tensed. He had seen a lot of strange tech across the galaxy, but this was something else entirely. "How long is this going to take?" he asked, watching her closely. She didn't answer immediately. Her fingers trailed along a ruptured section of the hull, and the strands pulsed with light before retracting back into her skin. "A full repair will take 3 cycles of your planet's sun," she finally said. Kane exhaled sharply. 3 days? That's faster than I expected. She turned to him, her expression calm. "I am efficient." He wasn't sure if that was confidence or arrogance, but either way, he wasn't in a position to argue. He stepped back and let her work, glancing toward the jungle surrounding them. The uneasy feeling of being watched hadn't left him. "Are we alone here?" he asked. The woman paused for only a fraction of a second before responding. "For now." Kane didn't like that answer. He rested his hand on his blaster, his senses on high alert. "You got a name?" She hesitated again, as if debating whether to tell him. Veyla. Kane, he said, watching her reaction. She gave no sign that his name meant anything to her, which was a relief. He had a reputation in certain parts of the galaxy, and it wasn't always a good one. The hours passed in tense silence. Kane gathered supplies from what remained of his cargo hold, while Veyla worked on the ship with an uncanny precision. By the time the first night fell, she had already reinforced the main structural frame and was beginning to piece together the thruster housing. Kane sat by the fire he had built, watching the shadows stretch across the jungle. Strange sounds echoed from the darkness, some distant, some unnervingly close. He glanced at Veyla, who remained focused on her task, seemingly unbothered by their surroundings. "You ever been off this planet before?" he asked. She didn't look at him.
No.
That surprised him. Someone with her level of knowledge shouldn't be stuck on a backwater jungle world. So why now? Veyla finally turned to him, her glowing eyes unreadable. "Because it is no longer safe for me here." Kane frowned. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. The next morning, Kane woke to the sound of movement. His hand shot to his blaster as he bolted upright, scanning the trees. Veyla was already on her feet, her gaze sharp and alert. "They found me," she said quietly. Kane didn't need to ask who they were. He could hear them now, heavy footsteps, the distinct hum of energy weapons being powered up. Shadows moved between the trees, figures approaching in formation. Veyla turned to him, urgency in her voice. "The ship will fly, but it is not yet at full strength. We must leave now." Kane didn't waste time arguing. He scrambled to the cockpit as Veyla darted inside, sealing the hatch behind her. The moment he powered up the engines, warning lights flared across the console, but the thrusters responded. Barely. Blaster fire erupted outside, streaks of red and blue flashing through the trees. The ship shuddered as rounds slammed into the weakened hull. Kane gritted his teeth and forced the engines to maximum output. Come on, he muttered as the ship groaned in protest. With a sudden burst of power, they lifted off. The jungle blurred beneath them as they broke through the canopy, the ship rattling violently. Kane gripped the controls tightly, scanning the sensors. Multiple ships were in pursuit. Sleek, fast-moving vessels with a predatory design. They were already locking onto him. Kane shot Veyla a sharp look. "What the hell did you get me into?" She finally met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "I told you. No questions." Kane clenched his jaw as the targeting alarms blared, the enemy ships closing in fast. He yanked the controls hard, sending his barely functional ship into a sharp dive just as a plasma bolt streaked past, narrowly missing them. "I hate this," he muttered. Veyla's hands moved over the auxiliary controls, her fingers dancing across the interface with surprising familiarity. "There is a way out," Kane scoffed, banking the ship to avoid another barrage. "Oh, is there? Because I'm not seeing it." Veyla didn't react to his sarcasm. "Fly toward the nebula ahead. Their scanners will be disrupted." Kane's eyes flicked to the star charts. She was right. A dense nebula loomed ahead, a swirling mass of ionized gas. It was a risky move. With the ship in its current condition, they might not make it through, but staying out here wasn't an option either. "Hold on," he warned, pushing the engines harder. The ship rattled violently, protesting against his reckless maneuvering. The enemy fighters surged forward, their formation tightening. Then, they opened fire. The ship lurched as a direct hit scorched the left wing. The control panel flickered wildly, warning indicators flashing red across the dashboard. Kane gritted his teeth, struggling to keep them steady. "We won't make it like this," he growled. Veyla reached beneath the console, pulling away a panel. Inside, a cluster of intricate wiring pulsed faintly with energy. She placed her hands over them, her fingers extending those strange filaments once more. The ship responded instantly. Kane's eyes widened as the thrusters roared to life with newfound strength. "What the?" "I can enhance the systems temporarily," Veyla said, her voice tight with focus. "But I cannot hold it for long." Kane didn't waste time questioning it. He angled the ship straight toward the nebula, the added speed giving them just enough distance to throw off their pursuers. The first layer of the nebula enveloped them in a deep violet haze. Electrical surges crackled through the clouds, static interference disrupting communications. The enemy fighters hesitated at the edge, wary of following too deep. Kane exhaled sharply. Looks like they don't want to risk it. Veyla pulled her hands back from the console, visibly drained. Not yet. Kane didn't like the sound of that. A sudden tremor rocked the ship. The nebula wasn't just affecting their enemies. It was wreaking havoc on their own systems too. Hold together, girl, Kane muttered, adjusting course. The gravitational pull within the nebula was unpredictable, dragging the ship in different directions. Veyla closed her eyes, pressing a hand against her forehead as if in pain. Kane shot her a glance. Hey, you okay? She didn't answer. Her breathing had turned shallow, her glowing eyes dimming slightly. Whatever she had done to boost the ship had taken a toll on her. Kane cursed under his breath. Great. Just great. The ship lurched again, and suddenly, something massive loomed in the mist ahead. A structure. No, a ship. An enormous derelict vessel, half consumed by the nebula's storms, drifted lifelessly in their path. Its surface was covered in strange, organic growths, as if the nebula itself had tried to reclaim it. Kane's grip tightened on the controls. He had seen a lot of things in his time as a mercenary, but this was something else. What the hell is that? He muttered. Veyla finally looked up, her eyes regaining some of their glow. A graveyard. Kane glanced at her. You want to be more specific? She swallowed hard. It belonged to my people. That sent a chill down Kane's spine. And then, from the depths of the wreckage, something moved. Something alive. Kane barely had time to react before a massive shape detached itself from the wreckage, moving with eerie grace through the swirling nebula. His fingers tightened on the controls as his scanners flickered erratically, struggling to make sense of what was out there. The shape twisted and reformed, its surface shifting like liquid metal, eyes, too many eyes, blinking into existence before vanishing again. Veyla sucked in a sharp breath, her hands trembling. No, she whispered. They should not still be here. Kane didn't like the way she said that. Who? The Voidborn. Kane swore under his breath. He had heard of them. Stories told in hushed voices, warnings passed between mercenaries and smugglers who had strayed too far into the wrong corners of the galaxy. Ancient beings that weren't just alive but sentient in ways no one truly understood. They didn't communicate. They didn't negotiate. They consumed. And they had seen him. The ship shuddered as something latched onto it, a tendril of pure darkness, pulsing with an unnatural hunger. Kane gritted his teeth, wrenching the controls, but it was no use. They were caught. Not good. Not good at all. Veyla forced herself upright, eyes blazing. I can stop them. Kane threw her a skeptical glance. You couldn't even stay standing 2 minutes ago. She ignored him, pressing both hands to the ship's core. The filaments extended again, but this time, they pulsed violently, sending waves of energy through the ship systems. Kane didn't know what she was doing, but whatever it was, the Voidborn didn't like it. A deafening screech filled the cockpit, not a sound made through the ship's speakers, but something deeper, inside their heads. Kane clutched his skull, barely keeping control of the ship. Then, the tendrils snapped away. The Voidborn recoiled, writhing, their mass shifting erratically as if in agony. Kane wasted no time. He punched the thrusters, sending the ship hurtling toward open space, away from the nebula, away from whatever those things were. The storm raged behind them, and the derelict ship was swallowed back into the violet mist. Veyla collapsed to the floor, her body trembling from exertion. Kane barely managed to keep the ship steady as they broke free from the nebula's pull, finally emerging into open space. Silence. Kane exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. That was too close. Veyla didn't respond. Kane turned, his chest tightening. She was still breathing, but barely. Her glowing veins had dimmed to a faint flicker. He knelt beside her, shaking her shoulder. Hey, stay with me. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. We need to go further. Kane frowned. You just nearly killed yourself saving us. I think we earned a break. Veyla's fingers weakly curled into his sleeve. You don't understand. They will not stop. Kane's stomach sank. You're telling me those things can follow us? She gave the slightest nod. Kane swore under his breath, standing up and moving back to the controls. His ship was barely holding together, but he pushed the engines to their limit. They shot into hyperspace, leaving the nebula and the horrors within it behind. For now, Veyla lay still, her breathing steadying. Kane exhaled, running a hand down his face. He didn't know what he had gotten himself into, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a simple rescue mission anymore. Whatever Veyla was, whatever secrets she carried, the entire galaxy was willing to kill for it. And now, so were the Voidborn. Kane glanced at her one more time before staring out into the vast, endless stretch of space ahead. He had a bad feeling this was only the beginning.